Okay, the rest of us are in Joshua chapter 4, Joshua 4, Yehoshua 4, Yeshua 4, Jesus 4. However, it all is prophetically all put together this way for a reason. Our Messiah will return. He will gather us. He will take us into the promised land. It's all prophetic. Father, we pray today that you would be with us. Our lives just are we exemplify faith, lives that we set up the memorial stones appropriately, that we might remember that you are a good God, that you make our feet pass through on dry ground. Abba, I don't know what people are facing right now. Well, some do, I do, including myself. But what I do know is that you are greater, and I'm going to trust in you. May we all trust in you completely and demonstrate it through our actions. In Yeshua's name, we pray together. Amen. Okay, in Joshua chapter 4, I'm sorry, let's just go chapter 1. Joshua is he is to command the people of God to go into the promised land, and he gets everyone ready to go. The Reubenites and the Gadites and the tribe of Manasseh, they do what they're supposed to do, and they go in with everybody. Chapter 2, Rahab is not forgotten. It's going to become important for us that you were not forgotten. Yahweh reaches in to anyone who is non-Jewish descent, and he reaches in and he grabs you, because a person who is genuinely of God is a true Judean, a true Israelite, is one who is won by faith. In chapter 3, they cross the Jordan. They cross through on dry ground somewhere up the way near the city of Adam and beside Zarethan. The water is stopped, and now we're on the other side of the Jordan, and Joshua sets up these memorial stones. Chapter 4, verse 1. All the nation had completed crossing the Jordan, that Yahweh spoke to Joshua, saying, take for yourselves men from and command them, saying, carry for yourselves 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet are standing firm, and carry them over with you to lay them down in the lodging place where you will lodge. In Revelation chapter 21:4, I just want to point out that we have some stones here as well. 21:4, 21:4. Is that right? Can you go to, I think it's 21:4. No, it's not there. Maybe I didn't put it. Well, it's the stone verse where there will be stones that are laid down. I have the Revelation 21:4. I think it's 21:4. You 14, that's what it is. Thank you. And the wall of the city had 12 foundation stones, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Joshua sets these up as a way to remember. You might be facing some difficulties in your life, even right now. I am. Challenges in my life. And one of the things that I've noticed about myself, I forget about God's goodness. I forget that He raises the dead. forget that he's in control of all things. So just think about the stuff that you're facing right now. And here's what I tell people in maturity. I think I need to get the mic because this is going in and out. Yeah. I don't know why. It just happens. This would be a little bit more enjoyable to listen to, probably. Who knows? But if you have something in your life that is just kind of this insurmountable thing, and one of the things I tell people is you got to keep your composure. Why do you got to keep your composure? Because you'll lose it. You all know how you lose it. You all have your ways. Some of you overeat. Some of you yell. Some of you overspend. Whatever that is, I've got my vices too. Mine's generally overeating. I can drown myself in whatever it is. And it doesn't even have to be ice cream. It can be anything, and I can just do calorie overload forever. Now, gratefully, I've got that generally under control in my life because it's really not the food. It's what it is that I am deadening the pain with, so that way I can get along in life. And sometimes eating is just, for me, it was at the time, it was a lot better than yelling, because yelling left a lot of relational carnage. Wherever it is, whatever it is for you, what we do with God is we tend to forget. We forget that he can part a sea. We forget that he can restore. So the reason I bring this up is because I know that the Israelites are still being tested by Yahweh. Even though they went through the wilderness and Yahweh tested them and tested them and tested them, and even though we have transitioned now into a place where we're going into a promised land, still he will test them. And even though you found Messiah Yeshua as your Savior, and that hope is totally secure in him, are you not still tested? You are. Here's what you got to do. You got to remember the day of your salvation. Do you remember how joyful you were when you remembered that your sin is wiped away because of the blood of a Passover lamb? Do you remember that? Don't lose it. I mean, I'm 50 years into that reality, which I'm so grateful for. But I'll tell you what, 4 years old could be a very distant thing. All the times of stories that I could tell you when Yahweh provided for Amy and I miraculously when we could not pay the rent, or when we didn't have enough food for our kids. And let me tell you, those were really hard times. When Amy and I had a hard time paying for food. I mean, I know there's things like food stamps or all that. I've told you I've had that card. I had that card in my wallet. But keeping your composure and just remember. We have such a short memory. And Yahweh wants to erase that. I mean, not Yahweh. Satan wants to erase that. And we've got to hold on to those memorial stones in our lives. Verse 4. So Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the sons of Israel, one man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, cross again before the ark of Yahweh, your God, into the middle of the Jordan, and each of you carry a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the sons of Israel, in order that this would be a sign among you, so that when your children ask later, saying, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall say to them, because the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of Yahweh, when it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall become a memorial to the sons of Israel forever. This is the same type of thing that happened 40 years prior when Yahweh brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. Exodus 13:4. 13:14. And it will be when your sons ask you in this time to come, saying, What is this? Then you shall say to him, with a strong hand Yahweh brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. Remember, remember, train our kids. Think about this. Can you even cross something when you don't even have anything to cross? Nope. So they are hitting an obstacle in both instances. Back when they're coming out of Egypt, they face a hardship because if Yahweh doesn't part the water, what will happen to them? The Egyptian soldiers will overtake them and they want to kill them. Or best case scenario is bring them back and put them in bondage again. Now, isn't this a sad commentary? They don't even have to catch up in order to get the Israelites, a lot of them, to want to go back voluntarily. Woo. We got to be careful about that too. Can't put ourselves back in bondage. We have to remember that he got us out of that to begin with, and we need to walk faithfully, but they didn't walk faithfully, did they? Verse 8. Thus the sons of Israel did as Joshua commanded and carried 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, just as Yahweh spoke to Joshua according to the number of tribes of the sons of Israel. And they carried them over with them to the lodging place and laid them down there. But Joshua set up 12 stones. Now, this is a different 12 stones. First 12 stones, he had the 12, likely the 12 tribes of Israel representatives. They got some large stones out of that river, put it up by where they were lodging, and stacked them up as a permanent memorial that everyone could see. What was the purpose of the memorial? To remember. Why? Because people forget. But then Joshua, verse 9, he set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan at the place where the feet of the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant were standing, and they are there to this day. Where did Joshua put the stones? Right in the middle of that river. What would be covered up when that water was flowing? Those stones would be covered up. You can't even see it until drought happens. You've got drought in your life sometimes, do you not? Of course you do. I know you do, because I know you and I know this pain. I hate it that one of the reasons I'm qualified to do this job is because I walked in a lot of pain in my life. I know exactly what it feels like. The pain that you feel, likely I felt it. Whether it be marital issues, financial issues, relational issues, direction issues, not knowing where I'm going to sleep issues, identity issues. I've had all these things. I've had plenty of droughts. You know, even to this day, you all know I'm a substitute teacher. I mean, I did a lot of school. I mean, I have a drought on the regular. But I look in the middle of that river that's got no water, and what do I see? The faithfulness of my God. Those stones are often exposed in the droughts of your life. Hold on to this. This is exactly what Yahweh wants you to see. He wants you to see that He is the God that is steady in your droughts. Verse 10, now the priests who carried the ark were standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything was completed that Yahweh had commanded Joshua to speak to the people according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. There's an order here. We have a prophet, and then we have a conqueror. We have basically, a conqueror in Joshua. You know, Yeshua, there's an archetype in Moshe, the lawgiver. This is our Messiah, Yeshua, who cut covenant with the children of Israel there at Sinai, and they ratified this in Exodus chapter 24. And then archetype moves into Joshua. So after a wilderness time, we all experience a wilderness time in this life, but then our Messiah is going to return. And when he does it, he's going to come back as a conquering king. Well, Joshua does exactly what Moses commands, and then the people hurried across. Verse 11, and it happened when all the people had completed the crossing that the ark of Yahweh and the priests crossed before the people. This is just a steady reminder that God, that Yahweh, He is the one responsible for this crossing. Whatever issue it is that you're facing, Yahweh is the one that is responsible to take care of that in your life. We're going to get to Jericho, but I'll just kind of tell you, fast forward just a second, but just think about this. Here's what people will do even to me. You've got a city that you want to take, and there's these big walls, and some guy comes along and says, we're going to take down these big walls, but really it's not going to be us. Instead, it's going to be Yahweh. Here's what our jobs are. Walk around, walk around, walk around. And I could just see the clamoring. Joshua, this is not going to work. It's not going to work. It doesn't quite work this way. You cannot walk and then shout and just think that. This is literally trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. This is what I get all the time. I hear it. I do this Torah thing. I thought it would be different. I thought I would just obey the law, but it just kind of seems like, I'm just doing these things. I don't see any correlation between doing the things that God's given us in the Torah and me feeling spiritual, to which I want to say, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Of course you see no correlation. Because it's not that the working out of the Spirit is about the Spirit's work, but it happens when we, in faith, just obey and do the things that God wants us to do. And here's the thing, it might take longer than what you want it to take. In fact, I know it will take longer than what you want it to take because you want it now. And you always got all kinds of things that He's working behind the scenes in your life and people's lives. He's testing you, testing others. There are things that we just cannot see. And the fact of the whole thing here is, do you trust Him? Verse 12, then the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh, what did they do? They crossed over in battle array. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. Before the sons of Israel, just as Moses had spoken to them, about 40,000 equipped for war crossed for battle before Yahweh to the desert plains of Jericho. And then on that day, Yahweh magnified Joshua in the sight of all Israel. Who did He magnify? Joshua. When Yeshua returns, His people will be with Him. They will trust Him, and then Yeshua will be magnified. So that they fear Him. The nations will fear Him, just as they feared Moses all the days of his life. And then Yahweh said to Joshua, command the priests who carry the ark of the testimony that they come up from the Jordan. So Joshua commanded the priests, saying, come up from the Jordan. So it happened when the priests who carried the ark of the covenant of Yahweh had come up from the middle of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up to the dry ground, that the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and went over all its banks as before. It happened quickly. Yahweh has things exactly how He wants them, and it will happen exactly as He says. Verse 19, now the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th of the first month. All right, people, the 10th of the first month. What happens at Passover on the 10th of the first month? That is when they select the lamb. Passover is going to happen on the 14th of the month at evening. You're going into the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So I just want you to see that's what's happening here prophetically. It's rooted in the past, but also there's going to be a coming day when this is all going to play out. On the 10th of the month, on the first month, they camped at Gilgal. This is going to become important. Gilgal is a rolling away. on the eastern edge of the Jericho. Verse 20, and those 12 stones which they had taken from the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. A lot of things are going to happen at Gilgal. If you go over to chapter 5, verse 9, it says, you don't have to click there. Then Yahweh said to Joshua, today I have rolled away the reproach, the disgrace of Egypt from you. So here they are, they're coming out of Egypt. They're trusting in the Lord. They're camped at Moab. They're going to go to a place of going into the promised land. And in the promised land, they're going to be able to partake of the land. It is, and a lot of this is like Abrahamic covenant, where they're going to possess the land. But just because they possess the land doesn't mean they get rid of the reproach. You know, there's a lot of issues that people have in their families when they come out of slavery. There's wounds of the past. And Yahweh's going to say to them at Gilgal, I removed the reproach so that you could come in and be with me. Okay? At least that's the way it was supposed to have worked out. In Hosea chapter 9, verse 15, if you know Hosea, I won't recount the story to you, but the prophet Hosea was to take an adulterous woman type, and she went and slept around. Yahweh always lured her in the desert to have her heart long for him. But toward the end of Isaiah 9:15, and all their evil is at where? Gilgal. What is Yahweh saying? He's saying, I removed your reproach. I wanted you to come to be with me, but still your heart was far from me. All their evil is at Gilgal. Indeed, I came to hate them there. Not hate in the sense of like, I hate you, but let me just tell you, Yahweh is a very feeling God. And what I see with God is he is really hurting. Have you ever been so hurt with your family that it turns to anger? Okay. So I want you to know something, that because, I'm an old guy and I know stuff. I know that anger is always a secondary emotion. Always. When people are telling me they're angry with one another, first thing I say to myself is, what's underneath the anger? There's something going on there. And so I start to dig to find out what that issue is. And generally, it's fear. Generally. And I try to unpack the fear. Our God is a jealous God. And he knows, it's weird. It's like, to me, I read the scriptures and what I know is Yahweh is all knowing. So he knows the outcome at the end of the day, but he still experiences this relationship with Israel. I removed your reproach at Gilgal, and yet you ran from me. You committed all kinds of adulteries with other nations. Indeed, I even came to hate you. Did he hate her? No. But the anger, the pain that he felt, because it's a real two-way street that we have with Yahweh. He really feels, he's really intensely in love with you. And when we abandon him, he gets angry because his feelings are real. Your feelings are real. When you face this kind of anger and all that, what Yahweh doesn't do is there is definitely punishment because of Torah, because of his law. He's a good and righteous God with consequences. But ultimately, that's part of what we see in Yeshua. Yeshua takes all the ultimate consequences and redeems us. If you want to be like your Father in heaven, feelings are a normal thing. Even anger will be a normal thing. But what we'll do is we will keep our composure and then we will take the hit. If you want to be like your dad, that's what you got to be like. You've got to take the hit. You know, even in marital counseling, sometimes, not that I'm really good at that, part of it is because of my theology. I say, I really only need one of you. Well, yeah, it's a two-way street. Yeah, it is, but it isn't. It is in the sense that it is, in fact, a two-way street. But here's the fact of the matter: one of you's got to die in order for it to work. So take your pick. Who's it going to be? You or them? To which they really have no choice. If you want to be like your Father in heaven, you're the one that chooses to die. I say all of this out of experience. You know, even for me in my own marriage, as I work through issues, I had to choose to die. And you would think, goodness, that how could Amy do anything wrong? You're probably right. But I thought she did something wrong. But even so, I had to learn how it is that it is my responsibility as a husband to die completely to myself in order to exalt her. You know, I'm not trying to play into my marriage here. I'm just trying to say that when we talk about this bride of Messiah, what are we talking about? We're talking about fidelity to the things that Yahweh has given to us. And we often commit adultery. And how do we do it? I'll tell you how we do it. We put ourselves into bondage to other lovers. We don't observe the Sabbath. We date night other men. We spend our time other places. I don't want to be like that. That's part, I'll tell you what, that's part of what finally got me is I got tired of prostituting myself out to men that only wanted to hurt me. I know it's a metaphor, but if you can kind of read through the metaphor, but that's what Israel does. And at some point, she figures out that no, my husband that sought to betroth me at Mount Sinai, he loves me so much, he gave his life for me. I am tired of pimping myself out to lovers that only are going to hurt me. I just got tired of living in pain. Well, because of the evil of their deeds, I will drive them out of my house. I will love them no more. Now, I'm going to stop there, but that's not the end of the story. If you continue on, you can read it in Hosea chapter 11, verse 1, that what he ends up doing is he takes that wrath out on his own son. It's like, oh my gosh. He who knew no sin became sin. He who knew no adultery became adultery for me. Verse 21, and then he said to the sons of Israel, when your children ask your fathers in a time to come, saying, what do these stones mean? You shall make your children know, saying, Israel crossed this Jordan on dry land. For Yahweh your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed, just as Yahweh your God had done into the Red Sea, when he dried up before us until we had crossed, that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of Yahweh is strong, so that you may fear Yahweh your God forever. If I were to wrap this part up, I would just say Yahweh is making good on his covenant. He is bringing a people into a promised land, and it is by his power. He wants his people to see his power. They are to trust in him. The people that do go in, they do in fact do that. They trust in him, and it continues on. You must trust me. It's going to start with Jericho in a couple chapters, but then the people, because humanity continues on, they fall away, and they're going to end up doing right in their own eyes. And that's the thing. Yahweh has told us what he wants us to do at Mount Sinai through his instruction. And when we deviate from that, what are we effectually doing? Right in our own eyes. We can't do that. All right. You read this. Joshua 4. What have you got? What things did you see? You know, I kind of have to do highlight reel stuff. Victor in the back.
So if I'm correct, this is the next generation after the generation that died that left Egypt. So they didn't see all of the miracles that Yahweh did on the way. And so when he says, he keeps repeating, when your children ask you why, when their children ask you, those children did not see any of the miracles that Yahweh did on the way.
Right.
And so this is the beginning of them telling the story, because by the time we get to the next book, this generation is gone, and it's a third generation that goes into the land.
Yeah. I got to hand it to this generation that they were too young, because Yahweh allows all the fighting men, that generation, to die off before he takes this new generation to the promised land. And it does seem that their hearts are desirous to go in. They have courage. They want to, and they do. Good. Thank you. Who else? An insight, a question, a comment, a thought.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm Deanna. I had when you were talking about, I was having like I don't know why just now, but a revelation when you were, the placing the stones, and then once the priest crossed over and then the water had separated for all them to go across. I'm like, oh, so it's kind of like another, of, we were saying the ones that are crossing over then, were they little, or were they maybe not had been born, or I don't know, maybe some of them were.
When they did cross over, yes,
Yeah.
they did have children in the desert.
Yeah.
So there would be some that
Some of
were
them.
smaller for sure. But you had a lot of, 20, 30-year-olds that they had grown up in the desert. So there could be, you know, even 40, 50, 60-year-olds,
Mm-hmm.
because the younger generation, it was, I can't remember exactly how the Torah phrases it, but it's fighting men, that generation, and the age, I might have been 20 to 50, something like that. Can't remember. But anyone that would have been below would continue on.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Joshua and Caleb that were
Mhm.
older, and they
Yeah.
could continue on.
I was just thinking though of how I was just connecting. I'm like, so when he originally took them out of Mitzrayim and then parted and they went across, and then now you have again, he's moving water again for them to go across, and then connecting it again, what you were saying about, those of us, and then coming out. The point of it was to, break free of slavery.
Yep. This is literally a second Exodus that's coming out of Moab. And so we don't get to go in that too much today, but there's something called a second Exodus. And I think it's grounded in scripture, where eventually Yeshua is going to come back for a second time. And at that second time, he's going to gather his people that are faithful to him and bring him to be with him in Israel. How that works exactly, I don't know. And that's just because it's a topic that I'm not particularly good at yet, but I will get there and I will grow and learn.
I just was connecting all of that again with the water, and another, again, going over moving water, and then for us what that means. And then what's strange is, don't anybody get weirded out, but before I even came here, I'm having like a flashback. I dreamt about this. What
the Are connection? You kidding? Okay.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't said this before. So then all of a sudden, all this was connecting. So
interesting.
Something powerful there.
Okay.
About us breaking free of that, of bondage and slavery, is what's coming to me. So
yeah, I'm gonna let you know. I'm not a real have a bunch of spiritual experiences kind of guy. Just being honest, because I don't make stuff up. I grew up in the charismatic movement, and they made a bunch of stuff up. I've had people around me, they think I'm going to speak in tongues, and they try to raise their hands above my chest, and they tell me the words are right there, and they're like, push it out. It's just so many abuses. So I'm really careful nowadays. I'm just like, you know what? If it's a miracle, it's a miracle, and I'm going to know it. I don't have to go making stuff up. I tell you that because I've had some experiences in the last few days that I'm like, okay. I just kind of taking notice. And so Yahweh's done something here with you as well. And it's not like anything parted, no seas. I didn't like watch a swimming pool like separate, but something that's a sense where I felt that the Lord was doing something, and I'm just not used to that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that. It's more of an affirmation for me that, my prayer with Yeshua's house always is I want there to be a move of the Spirit. I want God's hand at work doing stuff. Victor in the back, and then Kathy in the front. People at home need your can't hear you though.
In 8 and 9, is there a significance to the fact that the Israelites, the sons of Israel, took rocks from the river and put them on the land, and Joshua took rocks and put them in the river?
I'm sure there is. I just don't know what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a question I asked too. Other than getting from scripture that there's a memorial happening in both instances, it doesn't answer your question because I just don't know. If anyone comes up with something, let me know. I even think when I was reading it that I had a thought, but I couldn't grab it. Kathy up here.
Thank you, dear. Are you going to share your experiences with us?
Nope. Can't.
You brought it up.
I did. Sometimes I'll do that. It's called a cliffhanger. I don't know what to do. I'm not at liberty. Not at liberty to do that. Anyone else? Jacob in the back.
So I was just curious because if you put the stones from the ground in the water and the stones from the water on the ground, obviously those are going to be different stones. So just as like a testimony to the fact that like, okay, this isn't possible. But there's a part of me that wonders if when Yeshua comes back, if the quote unquote greater exodus happens along that same pathway, if those that are following him to the promised land, maybe the river is stopped up again and there are those 12 stones. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Likely. Yes, that would be cool. Part of the reason I do appreciate studying the whole Bible with you is when we hit these prophetic things and you see these stacks of rocks, you'll know. So yeah, maybe. I don't know. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Let's talk about circumcision. I have no illustrations. We'll just talk about it. Now it happened when all the kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan to the west, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard how Yahweh had dried up the waters of the Jordan before the sons of Israel, that they had crossed, and their hearts melted. They're scared. Rahab has already told them, hey, we know the story. We know what's happening. And now you've got these kings that know that they're about ready to go into battle. And they thought they had some time to prepare because you're not getting 2 million people across a big old flooded thing. But then it unflooded quickly. They've got a problem. They have no time. And their hearts are melting. I mean, 2 million people, that's a lot of people. And then you've got this whole ark thing. Like, what's that ark? What's that doing? Why are they standing there in the middle of a dry river carrying this box? And they all pass through? Okay. And there was no spirit in them any longer because of the sons of Israel. Verse 2, at that time Yahweh said to Joshua, make for yourselves flint knives and circumcise again the sons of Israel the second time. This is all related to Abrahamic covenant. Remember the Abrahamic covenant, Yahweh cuts with Abraham, promises in Genesis 12. He cuts the covenant in Genesis 15. Abraham believes the Lord and is credited to him as righteousness, our Torah portion for this last week. And then in 17, we have a sign of that covenant. What is the sign? Circumcision. a cutting away of the flesh. It seems that when Moshe, brings the Israelites out of Israel, or it's actually, I want to say it is, it's Exodus 4. You can read about it where Moses does not circumcise his son, and Yahweh's mad. And the question is, whoa, what's happening here? And then Zipporah, she ends up circumcising their son with a flint knife, throws the foreskin at Moses, and says, a blood-stained groom you are to me. Or just, she's mad. Let me tell you why she's mad. It's because they're not circumcising anymore. It kind of fell out of, I don't know, Moses and his manhood as he's even having an interaction with Yahweh. Remember, in relation, he's had the burning bush experience, chapter 3 of Exodus. This is chapter 4. So I praise the Lord for the graciousness of Yahweh, where Moses has been out in the desert of Midian for 40 years. He has this burning bush experience. And by the way, Moshe, the place that you are standing right now is holy ground. Take off your sandals, which we're going to hit at the end of chapter 5 in this text right here. But what had happened to Moshe with his son? He did not circumcise. In other words, it was not culturally acceptable or whatever in Mitzrayim, or that's just fancy for Egypt. It had gotten out of their cultural milieu, and Moses hadn't circumcised his son. And then there's this circumcision that happens because they're doing it, but it doesn't seem, we know that no one is circumcised after, at least we'll put a hard stop at, after the 12 spies are sent into Canaan to do reconnaissance. And this is now 2 years after Mount Sinai, but all that 38 years, there is no young boy that is circumcised. For what reason? I don't think the text tells us. It's just that they're not. Maybe it's Yahweh just having an emphasis on a circumcised heart. Maybe it's just hard to do that out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know exactly, but I just know that they're not circumcised. Now, what we do know is, what is Yahweh really after with circumcision? He's after your heart. It is a sign in the male flesh where that moving away, removing of the flesh, we'll get into that just a sec, but it's a removing of the flesh. So now, right before Passover, they are going to get circumcised a second time. So it's a mass circumcision. Now, here's the thing, is that can you really go into battle when all your men are freshly circumcised? You cannot. In fact, that's what happened in Shechem. This is, back in Genesis, I want to say chapter 34. I didn't write that one down either. But Levi and Simeon were two of the sons of Jacob, and Jacob's daughter Dinah had basically said, I want to kind of go out and explore the world a little bit. And over in Shechem, they're kind of the hopping place. They got the Gucci stores or whatever it is. And she's going there, and she kind of falls into their trap. And one of the men there, the king's son, ends up falling in love with Dinah, and it's just not acceptable. And then I can't remember the dad's name, but the dad goes to Jacob and says, my son wants your daughter, and can we have him? Can we have her? Can we have her? And he's like, no. But then Levi and Simeon, they devise this kind of wicked plan. The wicked plan is, we don't give our daughters and our wives over to men who are not circumcised. So we'll kind of cut a deal with you. We can kind of integrate and be friends with one another if you circumcise all your men. And if you do that, then, we'll be good. And so the dad says, yeah, Shechem, he can be circumcised and all the men. And so they had a, lack of better words, they had a big circumcision party. But in the party, there's a lot of pain in the party, a big medical hangover that happens for a few days. And during their weakness, then Simeon and Levi, they go and they kill all the men. I think part of the point there is that is a false circumcision. It's a circumcision for the wrong reason, kind of like just trying to have a relationship with my Messiah Yeshua so you can get out of hell. That is not a right relationship with the Lord. A right relationship with the Lord is a right relationship with the Lord. It isn't like, I just want to go to heaven. You got people like that in your life, right? I just want to go to heaven. I just want to go to heaven. I just want to experience the grace that is to be had in Jesus. And I just want to go to heaven, and then I'll do my token spiritual go to church thing. This is not relationship with God. It's a false circumcision. So here we have Israel, though, in chapter 5, verse 2, they're being circumcised a second time before Passover, because even in the Torah, who could not participate in Passover? Those who were not circumcised. There's no indication in the wilderness wanderings that there was a Passover either. So, help me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this is happening during the wilderness time. So they are all circumcised here, preparing for Passover. Verse 3, so Joshua made himself flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel at Gibeath Harloeth. And if you look down in your little notes, it will tell you a translation of those two words, and that's the hill of the foreskins. The hill of the foreskins. I don't know how big of a hill that you make, but, enough little mound over there in the corner that it's moundy. I mean, you can definitely see that they're over there. Now, this is the reason, verse 4, why Joshua circumcised them, all the people who came out of Egypt, who were males, all men of war, died in the wilderness along the way when they came out of Egypt. For all the people who came out were circumcised, but all the people who were born in the wilderness along the way as they came out of Egypt had not been circumcised. For the sons of Israel had walked 40 years in the wilderness until all the nation, that is, the men of war who came out of Egypt, were completely destroyed because they did not listen to the voice of Yahweh, to whom Yahweh had sworn that he had not let them see the land which Yahweh had sworn to their fathers to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. And their sons, whom he raised up in their place, Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised because they had not circumcised them along the way. Oh, I feel a little bit inadequate that I didn't remember that verse, but it explicitly tells us. In other words, I don't totally make stuff up. I never make stuff up, but sometimes I don't remember where the address is. And it's right here. It tells us that. Now, I want to cover circumcision with you for just a moment. What Yahweh wants more than anything for the children of Israel and for you are circumcised hearts. He even says it in Deuteronomy 10:16. I'm going to go there and just read you a couple verses. So circumcise your heart and stiffen your neck no longer. This is Deuteronomy 11. This is right before, I'm in the wrong book. Don't worry about that part. So circumcise your heart and stiffen your neck no longer. What does Yahweh want from you? He wants you to not walk in the flesh. He wants you to give yourself fully to him. And don't harden your heart toward Yah. Okay, that's what he wants. In other words, these men can have their private parts circumcised all day long, but that's just a sign. I can be married all day long and have this ring on my finger, but it's a sign. This is an important sign. Let's wear it, but it isn't the substance. The substance is my relationship with Amy. Does that mean if I have the substance of my relationship with Amy that I should now let go of the ring? course not. That would be stupid. It's analogous to other things too. Just because we have a relationship with Yahweh, does that mean that we let go of all the things that point to Messiah Yeshua? Of course not. That would be stupid. Next, go over to Deuteronomy 36. Yahweh says, moreover, Yahweh your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed, to love Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live. Who do we see doing the circumcision ultimately? Yahweh is going to do the circumcision. So it's kind of this thing that I don't fully understand. Yahweh says to you, circumcise your heart. Intend to do that. But ultimately, I want you to know that as Yahweh works in your life, he's ultimately the one that does the circumcision. That doesn't absolve you from circumcising your heart. It just lets you know that really it's a work of the Spirit, not a work of you. I don't fully understand it. It's a mystery. It's just the way it is. Now go to Leviticus 12:3. This is the express command of Yahweh in the Torah. Oh, maybe I didn't mark that one for myself. I'll just read it up here. Now, on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Do I not claim to you that part of the way that we are disciples of Messiah Yeshua is to give ourselves over to the commandments of God? Is that not a claim that I make? It's a claim that I make. And this is what it says explicitly. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of verses that seem to go against this, but it doesn't go against this. It goes against something else, but I want to show it to you. But you see the clear command of God in Leviticus 12:3. You see it? So what are we supposed to do with our little boys when they are borned? That's how we say it in my family. They're borned. They're borned. They got born. They've come out, and on the 8th day, what do? We circumcise them. Okay? But then we have some other texts that seem to say something else. Galatians 5:2. Behold, I, Paul, say to you that if you receive circumcision, Christ or Messiah will be of no benefit to you. Do you see how that's a little problem? It's like, what do we do with that? So I'm just going to be plain with you so you know. Yahweh wants to create a society, a people, where they're always remembering who they are. And as a church, as a fellowship, as people are raising their families in the Messiah, when a son is born on the 8th day, circumcise them. That's what we do. Does that circumcision in the flesh on the 8th day do anything to that child spiritually? It doesn't. But it does. It really doesn't, but it kind of does. What the does part is, in the same way Passover puts us into a place where we observe or remember our Messiah. The men of our families are constantly in a place all the time because they're using the restroom, they're getting dressed, and they are able to remember the covenant. In other words, it's a societal thing. It's a ecclesia thing. It's a people of God thing. And we do this as a natural way of being about our lives that puts our men in a place where they remember that they are a part of an eternal covenant that started with Abraham and it found its seed in Messiah Yeshua. And now I am to be obedient and I'm to be the kind of man that gives myself over to the commandments of God, and my job is to model what it means to be Messiah Yeshua for my children, for my spouse, and in my community. That's the goal. Now, what in the world happens when you're talking to a guy like me and you're 30 years old and now you're not circumcised? But you've circumcised your heart. You've given your life over to Messiah Yeshua. And the question becomes, All right, I want to do Torah things, but now do I get circumcised? Hold that thought just for a moment. We clearly saw in Galatians 5:2 that Paul says, behold, I, Paul, say to you that if you receive circumcision, Messiah Yeshua will be of no benefit to you. Galatians chapter 5. This is why it's so important to whatever verse that you're reading, and you take it out of the Bible, stick it back in the Bible where you found it, and then read all around it and start at the beginning of the letter. Go now to Galatians chapter 2, verse 12. For prior to coming of certain men from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles, but when they came, he began to shrink back and separate himself, fearing the party of the circumcision. Oh, that's what's happening. You know how we have Republican Party today and we have Democratic Party today? Way back in the day, they didn't have that. They had other kinds of parties, and one of the parties was the party of the circumcision, and they were going around to the different groups, and they were saying, oh, you 30 years old? And you want to be in the covenant family? Yeshua ain't enough for you. You got to get your pee-pee cut. And Paul's going, oh my gosh, you guys have lost your mind. It is not about that. Were they circumcised on the 8th day? No, they missed that deadline a long, long time ago. Now they're 30 years old. And what we're not going to do is try to replicate the 8th day circumcision on a man who's 30 years old. Now, there are some men in my life who are older like that, and they don't have any understanding of the party of the circumcision. So just so you know, that's part of what's going on in the book of Galatians, is that there were people called influencers who were somehow creeping into the congregation and basically saying this, Yeshua is not enough. And here's the thing, Yeshua is enough. Ask Rahab. Yeshua is enough. Enough. But Rahab, she was saved, and then she is grafted into the commonwealth of Israel, and then she begins to do the things she's supposed to do. That's what disciples do. And the man of God who's 30 years old, who hasn't learned the Torah yet, has just come to faith in Messiah Yeshua. It's a good and right thing for that person to come to me and say, I'm not circumcised. Should I be circumcised? To which I say, look, you kind of missed the deadline. It's about circumcision of the heart. At the same time, if they, for some reason, feel called of God not to earn anything, not to earn, you hear that clearly, not to earn anything, but because it is a spiritual thing that they want to do, then I'd say, okay, just make sure you get good anesthetic and, take a few days off work for sure. But even so, not a requirement, and certainly not, circumcision is certainly not the way that is often presented. No one is breaking the commandments of God in Galatians. Paul is not suggesting that you break the commandment of God in Leviticus 12:3 based on this text, nor does he ever anywhere. But that's what's going on in this text, because it is a command that is limited to the 8th day as a way of forming developing a society that falls under the grace of our God. That's a difficult one to explain, so I hope I did it enough justice this time around. Just want you to know, by the way, women are circumcised too. You're like, ooh, how does that work? Now, I don't want to get too far into that today, but there is a female part that when the marital bed is consummated, that something is broken inside of a woman that will allow her to bleed a little bit, And so in some sense, the union of man and woman coming together allows that to happen within the context of a female body. That's why you have the concept of Deuteronomy 22 of the virginity cloth, improving her virginity. Now, we know that, younger women, bicycles and all kinds of things that can break that prematurely, but there's a concept happening physiologically, and the concept is through the marital uh, covenant that's happening in the context of the intimacy of the bedroom. There is something that's happening there that she too there's something happening. Of course, at this time, I don't want to get too graphic and all that. I think what's crazy is when you go back to Bible times, you're thinking hyper conservative and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they really don't mind talking about, heck, they had a circumcision party with the hill of foreskins. I mean, for some reason, they're able to digest these concepts pretty regularly, and it didn't offend them too much. Well, because they're going into pass, or why do they do what? Oh, right. Well, that's because they are going into Passover. And I think your logical question would be, well, we're going into Passover too. And I think that's a great question. And I think that it is first a matter of the heart, and that I don't know that the command of Yahweh with regard to circumcision on a non-eighth day as they're older is breaking the Torah if you're not circumcised in that way. In other words, when we go in our very next feast, is it not? I mean, if you don't count Hanukkah or Purim, after that, which I won't count it because it's not a biblical thing per se, not prescriptive, but the very next feast is Passover. Who in the congregation can observe that feast? And will we check that part of a man's body? We will not check. And the reason we won't check is because it's a circumcision of the heart, because they've missed the eighth day. Now, does that mean that they have broken the Torah or the instruction of God? I would say, no, they have not broken the instruction of God, and that they would be allowed, provided they have a real, genuine relationship with Messiah Yeshua, they are circumcised of heart. Does that absolve me of this particular time in history where they're now circumcised? I think that they're circumcised here because it's a prophetic time and a prophetic picture of that Yahweh will bring those he has chosen, who are all circumcised of heart, when he returns as Messiah Yeshua and takes us into the promised land. We will be circumcised before that time. In that time, well, in other words, we will go into the promised land being right before God, even in the intimacy of our hearts. The flesh, a callousness on our heart will be removed completely, and we will go before our King in a righteous, good manner. I'm not saying I fully understand that part, because I don't, but Adelie does. So we're going to ask her. And then Victor, and then Jacob. Good. We have subject experts. I'm not saying I don't know. I'm saying I don't know, and I have good reason for not knowing, because it doesn't necessarily say. Up here.
I don't know everything, actually. I wanted to kind of add to what you were saying. The Torah command definitely is to circumcise on the eighth day, but there is a but, because Abraham was circumcised and commanded to be circumcised at 99 years old, I believe.
Yep.
And kind of adding to what you were saying about the party of the circumcision, when you read, like you said, all of Galatians, they were teaching that you have to be circumcised in order to be saved. And in that context, if you are circumcising yourself in order to be saved, that would be why Yeshua is of no service to you, because you're replacing Yeshua with the circumcision. But I don't think that nullifies becoming circumcised, because you have accepted Yeshua, and through Yeshua you are drawn near to the Torah. And like you said, when you get to the point in your walk of conviction and understanding of the Torah commands and wanting to walk it out, I don't think that verse that Paul wrote is in any way saying that you should not follow that conviction
Correct.
in your heart.
That's what I'd say too.
And also when it comes to Passover, even though we all celebrate Passover every year, we're not truly in the fullest sense celebrating Passover.
True.
Because the command about an uncircumcised man not keeping the Passover is in the context of the Korban Pesach, the lamb that's slaughtered.
Yeah.
And there's another verse in Deuteronomy that says we are not to slaughter the lamb in any of our dwellings, but only in the place where Yahweh our Elohim causes his name to dwell, which is in the temple. And since we're not doing that, I think that's where it opens an opportunity for those who are not fully walking in Torah from the 8th day to kind of learn and be able to participate, even though they're not circumcised yet. There's grace there that we have in not having the temple right now and not being able to do the Korban Pesach.
Yep.
That it kind of allows people to participate who otherwise would not be able to participate in the temple.
Right. And that does beg the question of your question of when Messiah Yeshua returns, he's going to theoretically have a temple and reign from Jerusalem where we would need to be
I don't think it's
circumcised.
theoretically. It's in Zechariah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the correction. On the way back to Victor, all the men in Romans, when we get to chapter, I think it's 3 or 4, I think it's 3. Remember, Abraham is both the progenitor or the point person for the circumcised and the uncircumcised. Because when was he counted as righteous, as Paul's argument? When he was uncircumcised. Because he didn't get circumcised until later. That's right. The Torah does not save you, but once you're saved, the Spirit produces in you a desire to obey, and all you want to do is, what can I do to please you?
So in 5, 6, and 7, it says that all of the men who came out of Egypt were circumcised, and circumcision is the sign of the covenant between Yah and the people. All of those people died in the wilderness. And so these people who were going to fulfill that promise to go into the land were uncircumcised. They didn't carry the sign of the covenant. And so it says in 7 or 8 that he raised them up. And so I believe from the reading that they came out circumcised, they died in the wilderness, but the covenant that he made with the people, they had to bear the sign in order to go into the land.
Fair enough. Jacob, Matt, Kathy.
Yeah, so it's what's going on there too is that if you look at, for example, with Timothy, so in Acts chapter 16, you have Timothy who has a Jewish mother and grandmother, but he has a Greek father. And so Timothy is circumcised. Titus is not circumcised, and that's actually preceding in Galatians chapter 2 where it says, but not even Titus was compelled to be circumcised. It's a really interesting point that she brings up is that with regards to the Passover lamb, there's no Passover lamb that we could technically eat right now that would be to Torah standard because it has to be slaughtered at the slaughter place that the Lord our God has appointed us. So I'm wondering if there's a connection with Hebrews where it says we have the right to eat from an altar that they don't even have the right to access to eat from because it's a Passover lamb that we get in transition. I think God's pretty serious, though, about the circumcision thing. And the reason for that is he almost kills Moses. So that's pretty serious. Now, one could make an argument that that's because Moses is an Israelite, right? So you could hypothetically make that. But then you have the mixed multitude that's going into the promised land. And it says all the men are absorbed into Israel. So my thought process on this would be then that as we are in the wilderness, you have a mixed multitude. Some are circumcised, some uncircumcised, because we can't get our act together. But Messiah Yeshua being foreshadowed through Joshua, we go into that promised land. He's going to take care of the circumcision, where when we finally all go in, then we can have the fullness of the circumcision, because then we start talking about the feasts of the Lord in Ezekiel that the people in Israel participate in. So it seems like there's some sort of supernatural gap right now where we're allowed to eat of the Passover lamb, but not in the physical sense, if you would. But yeah, I mean, my opinion is, yeah, you probably should be, but I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, God seems to take it pretty daggum serious.
He does. And the reason I can say okay is because the issues that we have with circumcision today almost have nothing to do with the circumcision party. It has nothing to do with anyone coming into a fellowship and saying, you better get that done or you're not saved. We don't have that issue today. That was an issue that was very contained in Paul's time. So, good point. I would never want to discourage anyone from getting circumcised. Yeah. Okay, Matt.
We
Don't ask me anything hard, please.
It seems like we do have that in a baptism sense now, where some churches would be like, "Oh, you're not baptized, so you're not saved."
Oh, totally. I've talked about that one before. That's
And-
that baptism is kind of our modern day circumcision.
Right. So there could be a baptism party.
There could be a baptism party.
As we're in a, I mean,
That's right. And you know, back then, that's
Well-
almost what I just can't even get in my mind of a mass circumcision. I can't even. I can't fathom that.
and then also I was thinking of the first Passover. They didn't just put the blood of the lamb over the door. They first believed that they should do that. Does that, they first had to have their heart circumcised before, before placing the blood of.
Yeah, that's a
Jesus
good
on there.
point because that's Exodus chapter 4.
They had to believe
That's
that
right. That's a
that
good.
would actually save them.
That's a good point. How about this? The bottom line of the things that we're talking about here is you just cannot fake out God. There is no magic prayer. Your heart is really ready, and we give our hearts to Yah, to the Lord, and He knows whether or not it is a religiosity thing. And part of the commandments teach us is there's no faking out God. So stop faking out yourself. Don't. And I get mad, righteously so, at our leaders who should know better. And they're putting people in situations that they think they're going to heaven and they're not. All right, over here.
Oh, one more thing. In our modern days, we circumcise the males before the 8th day.
Before they're what?
Before the 8th day. Is that like of Satan trying to interrupt? I'm just,
Maybe.
interrupt.
Maybe.
So now you can't even fulfill it. I mean,
Yeah.
well, it's
you
not the
need,
same,
you
but-
need, in my opinion,
but then he tricks you out of it. Like
It-
you
it-
can't even get the parents 2 days later because it's already done.
well, right.
see what
Because,
I mean?
Kaiser's a 2-for-1. We got to get you in, done, cut out. I mean, it's a carousel. We got to get you out. But to your point is, if you are in that stage of life where you are having children and one of them's a son, our counsel to you is put Kaiser on notice. It's going to be an 8th day. Because embodied in a circumcision on the 8th day is what's going to happen as we observe this, Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day, which points to a coming time after Sukkot. It's a 8th day that after that marriage supper of the Lamb, the millennial kingdom, however you want to think about that. I'm still unclear myself. I'm working through it. But there's an 8th day after there's a new heaven and new earth where everyone will be fully circumcised on that 8th day. And if we do it on the 2nd day, we've missed the object lesson for ourselves and for our children. Fair? Okay. How can everyone? Well, it seems to me that not everyone is. But if you want to be with the king observing Passover, well, anyone who's passing over in order to be in the New Jerusalem or not, no, that'd be 8th day. Whatever is going to happen in that millennial kingdom to be righteous and right before the king, Yeshua, we will be circumcised. What that looks like exactly, don't know. Don't know. All right, Terry, and then we got to move on.
Thanks. We keep talking about circumcision, but for me, it's not just the word circumcision. For me, I hear pain and like ripping of the flesh. And I never really experienced it until I came into this walk doing like Day of Atonement and the different feasts where you just kind of lay yourself before God and just say, whatever's in my heart that keeps me from you, tear it out or heal me from it. And without fail, it brings me to my knees. And there's tears and there's remorse and there's just this, I almost feel like my heart's being broken. And for most people in our society, that boys that get circumcised, it is so young, they have no recollection, or even if it's 8 days. But it's not about the actual physical, although when it's happening, there's pain involved and there's this restoration and healing that takes place. And it's no different than when we have sin in our life and what Yeshua had to do for that sin, and us taking care of it with, like celebrating the feast and coming before him honestly and tearing it out of our hearts to make room for him. So for me, I hear the word, I instantly think there's pain and there's separation and there's a process. It's not just a word, it's
Yeah,
not just a thing. So
for sure.
just wanted to share that.
Just want you to know I am circumcised. I don't remember a thing. I don't think it was on the 8th day. I just letting you know, I don't even have any recollection of pain. I'm sure there was pain. I get it, but I just want you to know the way that Yahweh does things. The ripping away of that flesh at that time, there was no recollection of pain. Yes, he was. Yes, he was. My contention is he's likely born on the first day of Sukkot and circumcised on the 8th day. That's my contention. In the back.
Shabbat Shalom. This is Stephen. Definitely one of the things that was told to me with my second son when he was circumcised is it's really more for the father and for the parents. Just you're putting your 8-year-old or 8-day-old child, putting them through something, and there's kind of a message there of you have this child who's innocent and blameless that you are subjecting to something, and that is a reminder for you of how Yahweh sent his son, and that your son doesn't have to die like in the Passover or like for Yeshua, but it's a marking that kind of reminds you, okay, he doesn't have to go through this, he doesn't have to die, he doesn't have to we have a son that was given in his stead. And so even though I think it leaves a better image, maybe not for you as the person who was circumcised because you don't remember it, I don't remember it, but for the parents of, I have this blameless child that I am subjecting to something, and that's a reminder for me for the rest of my life and the rest of their lives.
Yes, thank you.
I just wanted to add that circumcision, like the Sabbath, like the Moedim, like the Tzitzits, in and of themselves, they're nothing. Uh, you know, circumcision is nothing, but Yah said to do it. So each of these things that he commands us to do is to remember him, to obey him, to do what he's called us to do. The Sabbath, Friday night, sundown to Saturday, sundown, could have been a Tuesday. So there's nothing in that. If Yahweh had made his seventh day on a Tuesday, it would have been Tuesday. So I think when we look at these different things and we say, well, what is it about circumcision? I think the cutting of the flesh in and of itself means nothing from our point of view, but it means something from Yahweh. And he gives it to us so that everything that he gives us to do is to remind us of him and to obey him and to walk in his ways and to do what he's called us to do. And every single thing that he commands us to do is a weekly reminder and an annual reminder and a daily reminder. And, for others to see that we are doing what he's called us to do. We're a living testimony. We're to walk in his ways. So I just wanted to say that all of these things, it's nothing in it. The cutting of the flesh all by itself is not, it's not like, oh, I'm cutting the flesh and I'm throwing it in a heap. That buys me salvation. That's not what it does. Yahweh is looking at it and going, you're obeying me. You're doing what I called you to do because your heart is circumcised. And if your heart's not circumcised and you're doing it, it avails you nothing.
Amen. I'll even take it a step further. It doesn't even buy you sanctification. The ongoing work of the Spirit sanctifies. Literally, when you're obeying and giving yourselves over to the instruction of God, it's because you are compelled by the Spirit to do it. And whenever I, as a shepherd guy, and I call someone on it and I help them like see where they're missing the mark, it's not to get on to you about the mark. It's maybe you're not in line with the Spirit. It's to point out that the law continues to show us what our hearts are like. And me too. It's a mirror that shows me so that I can get right in the sense that I want to have an unrebellious heart. And then when I have an unrebellious heart, I give myself back over to the things of Yahweh. Thank you. Well, in verse 9, chapter 5, verse 9, then Yahweh said to Joshua, today I've rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you, so that the name of the place is called Gilgal to this day. Then the sons of Israel camped at Gilgal and celebrated the Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the month on the desert plains of Jericho. It's almost as if the Passover is being brought in prophetically to the promised land, to the millennial kingdom, to which I do think that the Day of Atonement brings Passover into a future time. And I've talked about that at other times, so I won't redo it now, but it's almost like a one and the same, where what makes you actually perfect is the atonement. It moves beyond redemption, forgiveness, into making you actually perfect of circumcised heart before the Father as he brings us into the promised land. Verse 11, and then on that day, after the Passover, on that very day, they ate some of the yield of the land, unleavened cakes and roasted grain. Then the manna stopped. Remember, they had manna that whole time, and now that they're in the promised land, it's different. Something substantively has changed. Literally, on the day after they had eaten some of the produce of the land, so that the sons of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate some of the produce of the land of Canaan during that year. Likely in the 4th or 5th month. They go in, there's some grapes and things start to ripen and so forth. Verse 13, now it happened when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing opposite him with a sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or our adversaries? Now notice his response. This is an angel of the Lord. He said, no, rather I indeed come now as a commander of the host of Yahweh. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and bowed down and said to him, "What is my Lord to say to his slave?" Essentially, he's worshiping an appearance of Yeshua, of the Son. This is the promised land. I want to know one thing. I'm letting you in here. It's not a matter of who am I for or am I against. It's, are you for the Lord, not for the Lord? I mean, these two military leaders have come in together. Again, verse 14, he said, this commander of the Lord's army, Yeshua, "No, rather, I indeed come now as a commander of the host of Yahweh." So Joshua fell on his face to the earth, bowed down, and said to him, "What's my Lord say to his slave?" And the commander of the host of Yahweh said to Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. The only other instance that I can find in the scriptures of the same type of thing happening was at the burning bush. This man with the sword, the only other two times I think in scripture that we have this is Balaam with Balaam's donkey encountering this man, commanders of the Lord's army, and then David's census in 1 Chronicles 21. The Lord shows up. You know, really, Jericho is of no issue to Yahweh. The cleaning house, the clearing out of the promised land, Yahweh's got this on lockdown. The real issue is between the commander of the Lord's army and Joshua and all the people. Do you serve me as king? I don't know exactly the, full conversation here. I just know that we're now moving into holy ground. First time toward a burning bush on the way to Mount Sinai, and then on to the promised land, and here we are. Chapter 6. Now Jericho was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. No one went out, no one came in, and Yahweh said to Joshua, "See, I've given Jericho into your hand, with its king and its valiant warriors." This is now, 38 years after the spies. 12 of them were sent into the promised land for reconnaissance and came back. And remember, Joshua gave a good report. And then there was Caleb. There's nothing like the heart of Caleb. Caleb, he knew by faith, we can do this. And really, we can only do it because of Yahweh's power. They were convinced of this. And the same thing kind of happens. You can see it in John 5, verses 5 and 6. There's this crippled man at the pool of Bethesda. How long was he laying there? 38 years. What do you want? Kind of like the command of the Lord's army. What do you want? Do you want to be well? Do you want to be of circumcised heart? Do you want to come into this promised land? Verse 3, "And you shall march around the city, all the men of war, circling the city once. You shall do this for 6 days. Also 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark." Where else do you see 7 and 7 like this? Revelation chapter 8, 9, 10, and 11. You're going to see 7 angels, 7 horns. Do the angels relate to the priests? I actually have no idea. I'm just studying that myself, trying to figure that part out. But it's the only other 7s like this, where 7 horns are sounded. Okay. Verse 4, "And 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns, shofars, before the ark. And then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times." Jericho historically it's a well fortified city. Really tight. The walls are tight. Might not have been the biggest, but it was tight. And they walked around it day 1 how many times? 1 time. Day 2 how many times? 1 time. Day 3 how many times? 1 time. It's about a 7-acre campus. You can walk around it about a half hour. It's like 2 laps around the track. So you got all your fighting men, and they're wondering how the walls are going to come down, and we got a half-hour walk here. So bring your easy ups and get some lunch. We're going to be a lot of sitting here. They didn't do it in the normal way. Sometimes they would lay siege to a place. That doesn't mean knock the walls down. It means that they would starve them out. They would guard the gates to and from the city so that way they could not go in or out, and then the inside people would give up. That was one way. Sometimes they dig under the wall, maybe go through a door if it was weak. Often didn't happen. Or go over if they could, because sometimes you got some pretty good climbers. But that's not how they did it here. They did it where they're walking around Jericho for 6 days. How many millennia? It seems when we start with Adam and Eve and go all the way to the millennial kingdom, how many thousand years do we likely have? 6,000 years. A day is like 1,000 years, 1,000 years like a day. We've got one trip around the block for 6,000 years, and then it's going to be 7. In other words, our Joshua is going to return, and he's going to have us maybe do something 7 times. I don't know. Verse 5, and it will be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a loud shout, and the wall of the city will fall down beneath itself, and the people will go up every man straight ahead. They're going to go right into that city. Is this Yom Teruah, where you have the day of shouting or the day of trumpets? I don't know. Not here, it's not. But is there a conflation in the prophetic imagery here? Maybe. We got to remember this is right after Passover, so it's not. But it's like bringing in that, I guess. Maybe. Verse 6. So Joshua and the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, "Carry the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of Yahweh." And then he said to the people, "Go forward and march around the city, and let the armed men go before the ark of Yahweh." And so it happened that when Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before Yahweh passed on forward and blew the trumpets, and then the ark of the covenant of Yahweh came after them. In other words, the ark is present because it's always God's presence with them. And the armed men, verse 9, went before the priests, and they blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark. And looking at the time, I'm going to have to speed along here. Verse 10, they gave this loud shout. They all shouted. They were to stay silent on the other days, and then a loud shout. Those walls came tumbling down. You could see verse 14, that was the second day they did it for 6 days. And then verse 15, then it happened on the 7th day. They rose early at the breaking of the dawn. They did it 7 times. Then this loud shout. And what did Rahab do? She had that scarlet cord hanging out her window. This is Yeshua going after the one, leaving the 99. And this city is going to be devoted to utter destruction. I just got to tell you something. Anyone in that place could have repented, turned from their wicked ways, and given their hearts to Yahweh, the God of Israel, just like Rahab did. Who is Israel? Israel is both Israel, but it's also all the Rahabs, all of the Ruths, all of the yous who put stock in the Lamb of God who died for you. And so essentially what you have is, no, you might not have been in Israel and doing the actual Passover, but you still have the Passover lamb present with you the moment you give your heart to Messiah Yeshua for real. And then you have this scarlet cord that you too are dangling. And so you too are part of the commonwealth of Israel. Now there's going to be one guy next week that we'll talk about that is going to take some stuff from Jericho that he shouldn't have. Yahweh says in verse 19, but all the silver and the gold, the bronze, the iron, that's going to be all going into the treasury of Yahweh to make the temple. The rest of the city is going to be devoted to destruction. Then in verse 23, so the young men who were spies went in and brought out Rahab. So she is saved. Look what Yahweh does. He saves her. Yeah, and her family. Now, not just because of Rahab's faith, they had to have faith too, but they had faith. In Romans 11:25 and 26, for I do not want you, brothers, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation, that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. The fullness of the Rahabs, the Ruths, the Jews have come in. And so all Israel will be saved. All Israel did get to cross over with Joshua. They were saved, but no one was left out. Even if they were not part of Israel, they could be a part of Israel with that scarlet cord. And so all Israel will be saved, just as it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will remove ungodliness from Jacob, and this is my covenant with him when I take away their sins. Verse 26, then Joshua made them swear an oath at that time, saying, cursed before Yahweh is the man who rises up and builds the city of Jericho. With the loss of his firstborn, he will lay its foundation, and with the loss of his youngest son, he shall set up its gates. So Yahweh was with Joshua, and the report about him is his fame spread throughout the land. Yeshua's fame will spread throughout the land at the inauguration of that millennial kingdom. Do not try to rebuild Jericho. Don't try to rebuild the Egypts of your life. Don't go back to that old life. Instead, stay obedient. And every time you think, why am I doing this obedience? Because it has nothing to do with knocking down walls. It has everything to do with knocking down walls. Why do I obey? Why do I obey? Why am I doing Passover? It's just another ritual. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's the very thing he's asked us to do, to walk in the path of our Messiah. Let's stand and sing a last song to our God.